When we went to Moscow, I was invited to a roundtable with the most elite nutrition coaches in the Soviet Union.
So,
Nikolai Volkov was...
How old were you then, roughly?
I was in my 20s. I brought it here and made the first supplement, I think, in the U.S. of creatine monohydrate. We added it to a very nasty tasting amino acid supplement that not very many people would probably take today. Elite world-class powerlifters and bodybuilders and football players took it. I don't care if somebody didn't lose a pound, but if they lost 10 pounds of dysfunctional fat and they put on 10 pounds of lean functional muscle, they would be a changed individual. We become a stagnant pond rather than a free-flowing river. And so creatine is one of those things that can help with improving flow.
Hello and welcome to Health in Focus. My name is Jacobus, Hollewijn. My guest today is a man who has become a dear friend of mine. His name is Rick Brunner. I have known Rick for roughly 25 years. He himself has been in health, fitness, wellness for close to 50 years. And most of his adult life has been an amazing, almost a roller coaster, I would say. But I thought today we want to talk a little bit about how it began for him and the journey that he has walked into this whole field of health. So Rick, really nice for you to come over and be here.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You bet. I'm always intrigued when you start talking about your journeys, and especially your journey to the East Bloc nations in Europe. You started that at a very young age. Can you tell me a little bit how all this came about?
About the Europeans?
Trips I mean, what happened?
Well, I was helping a friend of mine start a sport nutrition company many years ago called Champion Nutrition.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, they made Metabolol and Cytosport and all that, Cytomax, all those things were out of Champion. Yeah. And I was really intrigued by some science that they had that was from Russia. And they had it in, they had a summary in English, but the paper itself was in Russian. So I had it translated and just fell in love with the whole, scheme of how they were studying things in Russia and whatnot. And I really wanted to go. So an opportunity came up with the National Strength and Conditioning Association. NSCA is a group of mostly strength coaches in the NFL and, major sports and then college and whatnot. Yeah. And they had a planned trip to Bulgaria to see the Olympic weightlifters there. Wow. And also to Moscow to visit with training methodologies and whatnot. So they were involved.
So the curtain was still up, right? I mean,
it was still the Soviet Union then.
Soviet Union, and so they would allow those kind of trips.
Yeah. Oh. They were watching us, but we were allowed, and so we went to Bulgaria first. And I got, I kind of was fortunate because I was more interested in restoration and nutrition and whatnot, and the other guys were interested in the training. So when the Soviets and the Bulgarians found out that I was into nutrition, they actually linked me up with their top nutrition people. Oh. So I spent some time with the Bulgarian pharmacists and coaches and whatnot there that worked with the supplements and whatnot. And then when we went to Moscow, I was invited to a roundtable with the most elite nutrition coaches in the Soviet Union. So Nikolai Volkov was...
How old were you then, roughly?
I was in my 20s.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you had enough knowledge for them to have you in a round table.
Yeah, I'd already started working on things, and they were just curious as to what we were doing, and I was curious as to what they were doing. And so that was the first trip. So I got to meet some very high-level people, made some connections, and then when I came back, they already kind of filed it and knew that I was interested. And so I was invited back that same year to an international symposium in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg.
Right.
And at that symposium was really a lot of the best scientists in the world were there. I was the youngster of the group.
You were the rookie.
Yeah, I was the rookie, just a sponge, picking up on stuff and whatnot. So that's where I started, and I went a number of times back to Russia. I was invited back. Do you recall
some of the things that were being discussed as far as diet is concerned or nutrition in general?
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of the restoration things, minerals that they were using, and plant extracts that they were using, and today we have what's called shilajit, which is in Russian it's called mumia. It stands for it's the same stuff, but they were using that for recovery. So a lot of the Soviet and Bulgarian nutrition things were focused on recovery, on restoration. So creating the stress of the training itself and then recovering very quickly so they can do it again much more efficiently. So
were you at that time aware or thinking about possible use of steroids, because they were always talking about the East German athletes during the Olympics, or the Russian and Bulgarians, that they were probably injecting with stuff? Was that something that you observed, or was that even part of the discussion, or was that not part of the discussion?
it was a part of the discussion.
And how did they react? Were they kind of quiet about it?
No, they were. By then, I had met some really good colleagues there, and actually helped two of them immigrate to the United States. Dr. Morris Silber, who wound up at Washington State in biochemistry, and then a couple other guys that I helped. One from the Ukraine that's still alive, as well, and then a speed strength coach named Ben Tabachnik, who came here. He was the national team's sprint coach, and he immigrated. I helped him get settled. So yeah, I got to know a lot of really good people. Really good people.
I just interrupted. You were talking about a Volkov.
Well, Nikolai Volkov was the head nutritionist for the Soviet Union.
Okay.
So he was the one that did a lot of the protocols for their recovery programs and whatnot. And he's actually the one in 1988 when I went back for the symposium. We were just about town just to seeing the sites and everything. And I said, hey, I want to put together some new supplement things. What would you add to it? And Nikolai said, and another guy said, add creatine. So this is the first time that anybody had heard of creatine outside of the Eastern Bloc, to my knowledge. And I brought it here and made the first supplement, I think, in the U.S. of creatine monohydrate. And bought it from the Germans. And Schweizerhall was a German company back then that made it, and so we started making it. We added it to a very nasty tasting amino acid supplement that not very many people would probably take today. But it performed well. And so elite guys, elite world class power lifters and bodybuilders and football players took it, that kind of thing.
For those people who don't know, can you explain? I have an idea. I have my own explanation about creatine, but can you tell people what we're talking about here? Well,
creatine monohydrate is a compound that is primarily used to increase phosphocreatine in muscles, and that's a major cellular energetic. And its main advantage for athletics is just to increase the force of muscle contractions. And when you increase muscle contractions, you increase the growth process to build more bigger, stronger muscles, basically. So it's another additive for that.
And so I knew when creatine became kind of popular in the mid-90s, I would say, roughly, it became known. I think there was a company, Metorex or something. Didn't they start with creatine monohydrate in some kind of a powder?
Probably so. There's a number of companies over the last number of years, but it's really picked up steam in the last maybe 10 years, 5 years, 10 years. The science has caught up to it. We had some very good researchers from England study it. And then in America, we had some good scientists that started studying it more in athletic performance, and it's proven itself quite a bit.
I heard once that you can get creatine out of food. There are different foods, but red meat, I think, is the most concentrated
Probably
form.
so, yeah.
And I once heard that if you do a teaspoon of creatine monohydrate, which is about 5 grams, that would be the same as eating 2.5 pounds of raw red meat. Have you heard that comparison?
Probably so. Well, it's in red meat, so it is.
I always thought that these Bulgarian weightlifters, they had one big neck, and I thought they probably couldn't move left or right. They were just eating all this meat. But now it may have been just
they were taking other things, sure, yeah. And and the anabolic side, I knew all the stories. Early on, I knew what was going on with that. They were big into it. And of course, they got caught later and suspended and whatnot. And
anabolic means building muscle.
Anabolic itself just means to build something. It could be anabolically building muscle. It could be anabolically building fat. It could, whatever. It's a building process. Yeah.
And when you went on this trip, did you primarily go to the Soviet Union, or did you also go to? You said you were going to go to Bulgaria. Where did you get more information or better information? What inspired you more? And were these people talking a lot together?
Well, they worked, I think, together because they're all part of the USSR back then. They were all connected. I mean, Czechoslovakia was part of it, and Bulgaria and Poland, and it was all part of the Soviet bloc. So I'm sure they shared information, but they were also probably doing their own things to just get an advantage because the Bulgarians competed against the Soviets and vice versa. So,
Sure.
But the most I learned probably was from the Russian side because I just made better connections there, developed friendships there, and was invited back by the USSR and then eventually Russia, because when the Eastern Bloc fell, then the curtain fell, then it was Russia at that time. So, but mostly I spent time in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. Yeah.
You yourself were also an athlete. You were a hammer thrower?
I was fourth in the NCAAs in 1980 and All-American in the hammer throw on a national championship team. It was a great team. Yeah. And I really enjoyed it. And to this day, I still do it a little bit, and hopefully get back.
When your hip allows?
When my body allows and stuff. But it's great to throw it. It's just a great feeling. And,
how interesting.
Yeah.
So you had all this information. How often did you go? How often did he allow you to come?
Once a year or every couple of years. I went for probably about 6 or 7 times, I think, total.
Total?
Yeah.
And then you would go for what, a few months, couple months?
No, I went for like 10 days or
That's it?
Yeah, 10 days to 2 weeks or something probably. And well, I had people that showed me around and got me to the right institutes, and we went to all kinds of institutes, the Institute of Oncology too, and see what they were studying, and just whatever we wanted to do, we were granted access to it. So,
and what did you think of their developments? Was there a lot of emphasis in those nations on those kind of topics? Like you mentioned oncology. I know athleticism was a way for them to really present themselves to the world in Olympics and World Championships. You didn't always see much about what happened in the rest of the country because that was just a different culture.
Sure.
But your circles that you were moving in, it must have been cutting edge at the time.
Yeah, for them, they were doing a lot of pretty good pioneering work. Yeah.
I remember once when I met you, one of the first few times I met you, you were talking about the difference between power and speed, and I think those were the only two you were talking about. What is power? What is speed? And you said we're trying to get the most out of an athlete if they understand the difference between power and speed. Can you explain that, please?
Well, I mean, that's been a long time ago, so I haven't really worked in the speed category so much. But speed is could be a very short distance. Power is usually under some kind of force, like a weightlifter or pushing against an NFL lineman or something like that. That's creating the power.
Yeah.
And speed could be just pure speed. There's speed strength. There's just all kinds of things the Soviets classified as different methodologies of training. Yeah. Much more refined and targeted than what we were doing and other countries were doing. Yeah.
Really, just more targeted, huh? Now, when you came back, you told me once that you also made connection with NFL coaches because of your hammer throw. You were working with track and field coaches.
Yeah, I worked with. I didn't so much work with the throwers, but I did work with elite sprinters and long jumpers and whatnot. Yeah. So,
really?
Yeah, Olympians, things like that. Yeah.
And then. One of the things I remember, you had created your own vitamin company. It was small. Yeah. Tell us a little bit more how that came about, and who sponsored you, who helped you with that. Where did you get your information from?
Well, that was started after I went to the Soviet Union a few times, and we created some unique formulas that had some things from the Eastern Bloc. And
I remember I couldn't really understand all the ingredients.
Yeah, and so we developed a few products as just some powdered drink things, and like that nasty one that had the creatine in it. And we had Mumia, which is Shilajit. It's commonly known today, but it's a restorative nutrient that they were using for recovery as well. And a lot of electrolytes and microelements in it. And then there were some plant extracts that had anabolic effects.
Such as?
Ectosterones, terkesterone, ectosterones.
Oh, in those days you already had that stuff.
Yeah, we already have. Wow. I brought it here from Tajikistan and into the U.S.
Terkesterone.
Turkesterone,
Yeah.
and ectosterones.
Yeah.
Ectosterones are still used. It's kind of a pharmaceutical in Russia, I think. But back then they were using it for helping people recover in hospitals and patients and stuff like that. But we brought it back in small pill form, and then we brought it back in powder and made it also into powder and whatnot to make it into some supplements.
Yeah, I remember that you approached me with those supplements, and I go like, wow, they're called Atletica.
Yeah.
It was quite, had a very powerful name to it, in my opinion. It was not athletics, it was Atletica.
Yeah,
Kind of a little bit
well,
of
in
a
Russian,
German.
Atletica is athletics, so that's what I named it as.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So then, moving on from there, you really started working with coaches in NFL and track and field, and were they saying, well, your methodology doesn't work with our methodology, or were they interested in what you had to say? How did that go?
No, it went very well. I was invited.
You still have connections with them.
Well, not as much. I mean, my era was, like, for instance, I worked with the strength and conditioning coaches mostly. Yeah. So with the 49ers and the Raiders and the Rams and the Broncos and the Green Bay Packers, and and most of the time I spent were actually with the Niners because I was a Northern California guy and had my company there when I first started, and so I worked just to educate basically on different restorative means and whatnot with them, and got invited on the field a lot, and it was a lot of fun, with them.
And what did you show training techniques, or you were still primarily focused on the nutrition
side? The nutrition side. But the thing is, you need to know what the athletes are doing. A supplement's only as good as the training that the athlete's doing. So they really need to be worked together. So my goal was to try to understand what stresses they need to be put under, and how they need to restore, how quickly they need to be restored, and whatnot, and then design protocols for those things.
Is that complicated?
Well, it's more so than just here, take this kind of thing. A lot of supplements today are, everybody's copying everything else and whatnot, True. And it's really how it's used, And so, like for example, creatine, we now know that creatine's efficiently utilized in recovery, like with a protein powder or something like that.
So you do it more after your workout, you do creatine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that's when I generally recommend it, and how I use it too is after a workout. Yeah.
Was it also that you learned certain things in the East Bloc nations that were very new to these professional coaches here in the United States? Did they say, where'd you get that from? Or did they say, oh, we've tried that, it doesn't work? How was that communication?
It was all pretty new, really. I think initially, years ago, there was Bob Hoffman's protein powder, and it was, I don't know even if it was that great of a protein powder, and so proteins improved. Creatine started to come on the scene, electrolytes, plant sterols and sterolins and stuff like that, minerals, all kinds of things started to be added. So, a whole gamut of new technologies came out. And, you got to remember, too, this is back before the internet.
Yeah, I know. You're right.
In the old days, I would have to do research. I would have to go to Stanford University or Berkeley or UC Davis to do research and, sit there for hours going through, stacks of books with little tiny type, and then going to the stacks, and about probably 20% of the time you'd find an article, and that's it. Now I can sit on my home desk, and if you know what you're doing, you can find the science within hours. You can get a whole bunch of stuff. So, and that's how I work today. I work from home primarily.
Yeah, your in those days when things started, Joe Weider was a big name. Did you meet him?
Oh yeah, I knew Joe.
How did you get in contact with somebody like him?
I don't know if it's been so long ago since I worked with.
You're so old. You're so old.
I know I am. I'm a lot older than I was. I was in my 20s.
Yeah, I know.
And 20s and 30s probably, 30s when I worked with them. And I wrote for Muscle and Fitness and Flex and Ironman and Powerlifting USA and a few articles here and there. A lot on athletic performance, restoration, nutrition. Pretty much just focused mostly on nutrition.
Right.
And so I knew Joe, but every time I met Joe, I would go down to his his office in Woodland Hills, and I'd show up, and they'd say, "Oh no, Joe wants you to go meet with him at the restaurants." He had his favorite restaurant, so we would just sit and talk. It was a lot of fun.
What were some of the things that this man? Where did he get his knowledge from?
Well,
I wonder that
he was a marketer.
That's
Joe,
more marketer.
He was
than,
more marketing.
He
He worked with, of course, the bodybuilding scene when it really exploded. He helped launch Arnold Schwarzenegger and other top bodybuilders.
Lou Ferrigno also.
Lou Ferrigno, and all those guys were in the magazines and everything. Yeah. So he helped get them notoriety, and at the same time it was a win-win because they helped him sell magazines, and that's what he was. He was a publisher.
Sure. I see.
So yeah.
But he also made products.
Yeah, he had Weider fitness supplements and stuff too.
That. He was pretty much a standard. It wasn't always. I think they had some artificial sweeteners and sugars in it. And that's at some point in retail, people are looking at, now we want to go as natural as we can.
Yeah, yeah.
But it was all the starting, right?
Well, the evolution of the industry has changed a lot over the years,
Well, and like you say, so many people copy each other.
Yeah.
You got whey protein, and it comes from New Zealand cows, and then you go grass-fed cows, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. But different companies have that product, so they maybe all go to the same farmer rancher.
There are a few core suppliers of things, especially for quality, and that you go to. Yeah.
What are some of the things? Oh, by the way, did you end up running into Arnold Schwarzenegger also?
Oh, sure.
Lou Ferrigno?
Yeah, Lou. Not so much Lou. Arnold a few times.
I met Lou one time on a trade show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he has hearing aids in. He was not a.
Yeah.
Maybe he had them already for a long time.
Yeah, he's had them for quite a while. Yeah. With Arnold, it was mostly down, not necessarily at Gold's Gym. There was Gold's Gym, and then there was World Gym down in Southern California.
Kind of
Venice.
competitor.
World was in Venice Beach. Well, World Gym was started by Joe Gold, and then he sold Gold's to other.
That's why it's called Gold's Gym.
Yeah, Joe Gold, and then Joe started World Gym, and it was on Venice Beach, and that's where Arnold went and trained. So I saw him there, or I saw Joe selling T-shirts behind the counter, or whatever. It was just not so much publicity and notoriety as it is today. It was just really relaxed. You just saw people training and left them alone or talked to them, and they were. I always thought Arnold was quite the jokester, or when I was around him and stuff. Yeah, I didn't know him super well. I mean, I wasn't pals with him, but I knew him enough to get in his circle a little bit. So yeah.
Anybody else in that industry who has inspired you to, for example, come out with some of these products that you have created?
Not the industry. It's more the scientists that are out there doing good scientific work. They may not be in the nutrition performance industry at all. They may be just studying in a university or whatever. And there's some people that have studied like creatine, for instance, and whey and protein powders, and looking at how you use it, the timing of it, the quality of it, the dosage, things like that, and then how. But again, with me, it's more understanding how it can be used within the training protocol. I'm always big on training first, and supplements next. So many people, and actually, sometimes supplements kind of evolve out of things. Like there's pre-workout supplements now, and then of course there's post-workout supplements, which is usually like protein powder and creatine and whatnot. I tend to focus more on restorative type supplements, and because you want to create a functional stress. The training is designed to create a stress, and then the body needs to restore and what we call supercompensate, which is just to improve and get to a higher level and keep building that way. Elite athletes, that's how elite athletes train. They have to do an intensity program that's in the zone for them, whether they're young or they're elite, and then evolve. But the restoration part of it is a big important part.
And in fact, that works for everybody, right? It doesn't matter if you're an elite athlete or somebody who recreationally goes to the gym several times a week and just wants to work out. If you use your muscles, you somehow need to restore it afterwards.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And for me, this whole field is fascinating because when you go back in history, when you talk about Joe Weider, he was a marketer, but he was in a field that was slowly but surely developing. And you go back, we had the guy who played Hercules. He was a bodybuilder. I forgot his name. I forgot his
The early guys, yeah, the early.
They were into bodybuilding and
Steve Reeves.
Steve Reeves, and he came to Bozeman at one point.
Yeah, Steve.
I think he was over at the Bozeman Athletic Club at the time.
Wow.
And he came in, and I met him. Well, he was definitely older.
Yeah.
But to have somebody like that come in and know what they have trained and the methodology or the methodology that they used or the equipment that they had, everything has improved these days.
Yeah.
But when you wrote in these articles in Flex and bodybuilding magazines, were you aiming more towards the elite athletes, or what were some of the responses that you received from people?
Not necessarily. I liked working with elite athletes. I enjoyed it. But a lot of the magazines are for just the average person to learn.
Did you get a lot of comments? Did you get comments over the years?
Yeah, about different things that we promoted or urged people to do. Of course, articles on creatine or protein powder or whatnot. At the time, people, the average person can benefit from that too if they know what to do.
I know that you still like the creatine, and not just for the muscle, but you told me something. There is some research on brain health and creatine. Can you tell me anything about that?
Well, I mean, creatine has some good science all in a different directions.
It's really just a nutrient.
It's a cellular energetic. So what happens is, like with the brain, if the brain is not handling energy efficiently, then creatine could be a benefit. Also with people that have had like some brain trauma or concussions or something that, it can help them restore quicker. Because I think the brain kind of goes into shutdown mode and into sleepy mode, and so creatine will help energize the brain cells a little bit more efficiently.
Now, I think that is fascinating, especially people who have had concussions or TBIs or whiplash, but how long after something like that happens do you really need to get into the creatine, or can you do it even years later when you learn about it and you've had concussions? Is it still valuable for them to help the brain, or is it then too long gone?
I haven't studied that, but my suspicion is that it probably will still help somewhat. It would be worth a shot to see. Creatine's not toxic.
No,
you're not going to take a huge amount of it. About 5 grams is plenty. 4 to 5 grams is plenty. If you do it consistently, take a day.
Yeah,
and just try it. All kinds of things from COVID too, and a lot of things.
Is that right?
I would think so. Yeah, I haven't really delved into it, but it would take me like a day to really get into it and kind of see where it would lead. But my suspicion is it would probably help with a lot of different health conditions.
I see. So it's not just
cardiovascular too. Why not? The body is just
cells,
energetic cells, and the more energized they are, the better they are.
You bet.
So if they're stagnant, that's an area that I work on in a lot with my research now. Is as we age and with bad diets and whatnot, we create stagnant. I call it the stagnant pond. We become a stagnant pond rather than a free-flowing river. And so creatine is one of those things that can help with improving flow.
Any other things that you notice are very beneficial in athletics? People who want to work out, people who want to work on fitness or getting in shape. Ginseng, for example, I would know is an adaptogen, which means that it helps the body adapt to stressors.
Yep.
And we all are exposed to stressors one way or the other. I'm just wondering if there are certain products that you have learned in your field that people should look into if they want to start get going in supplementation besides just working out.
Well, you mentioned adaptogens, which is an interesting thing. We haven't discussed that much, but when I was in Russia, I got to know Israel Breckman, who was the father of one of the main founders of adaptogen research in Russia.
Yeah,
and studied it on thousands of people, thousands of truck drivers and athletes.
Really,
and they all used adaptogens. And of course, we know some like Tulsi, holy basil, with withania, ginseng, American ginseng,
ashwagandha,
Siberian ginseng,
and the mushroom. Many of the mushrooms, the medicinal mushrooms like reishi and maitake, are they also not adaptogens, or is that more? You feel it is more from an herb?
I think it might be more for the immune side, for the way I look at it. But again, I'm not a super expert in adaptogens. I mean, like Breckman was, but I learned from those guys, and different adaptogens. Mostly, what they were using was Siberian ginseng or Eleutherococcus.
Yeah.
They were doing a lot with that. Schisandra. Was
Schisandra, right? That's right.
Yeah, Schisandra, and so those were used when I went back when I was there in the late 80s and 90s.
Interesting. I mean, in a way, we know they've been around for
thousands of years.
Of years
Yeah.
that people have been working with it, but at some point, I think that going from China to Russia, they're like neighboring countries. So it is understandable that the lines, the borders were probably crossed, and these
For sure.
herbs would make it in there.
Yeah.
And then you have things like rhodiola. I think rhodiola isn't that something that is grown in Russia?
Yeah, it's grown a lot in Poland now.
Okay.
But in the early days, it was grown in Russia, so they used a lot. They used a fair amount of rhodiola as well.
Yeah, it seems to be a great adaptogen.
Rhodiola is a great
as well.
adaptogen. I think, I think Withania and rhodiola, and those are the couple of my favorites that I like the most. Yeah.
Your knowledge in this field is, are you still active in it? I know you're doing more research and other things that I would like to talk to you about sometime, but the athletics, is it still something that pulls you, or do you say, well, I think that field got covered, I'm more into some other fields right now?
I still work with
it's always hard to do really good research on a bunch of different things. So sometimes
I'm focusing mostly now on older people because I am one. We're all aging, and there's about 160 million Americans over age 40, and a lot of them are in really poor health. And so my mission now is to study
160 million over age 40.
Yeah, over age 40 out of 340 million or whatever we have. We're an aging society, and my hope is that we can start to educate and introduce new protocols for people to stay healthy and active into their very, very old age, and not wind up with assisted living or having a family member take care of them. They can take care of themselves, and that's really where my focus is now, is to understand the diet, the exercise, intermittent fasting, and supplements, and how they all fit together in a cohesive unit, but make it simple. My whole thing is simplicity and efficiency and effectiveness. So
it is, and that actually, I think then all of a sudden about the fact that we're all so different, right? And there are people who are vegans and vegetarians who go to the gym and they look fantastic. They look healthy, strong, and somehow that diet works for them. There are people who were going on the Atkins diet and do that, and there's the intermittent fasting and the carnivore diet now, and there are people on macrobiotics, and there are so many different diets out there. Some people have absolutely no diet. I mean, they eat whatever, but they go to the gym and they work out. And so the exercising and the physical fitness is important, but not everybody realizes that nutrition needs to be a part of that, because you are put together by, 70 trillion cells that all need nourishment, and it is impossible to feed them all the time every day, but to become a little bit more aware that if you are changing your function, that you have to change the structure that goes with it. And I often realize that people, they have the drive to become fit and healthy and strong, but they don't realize that in 10 years from now, they may have abused the muscle and the tendons and the ligaments, and all of a sudden they start having problems. So understanding adaptogens and understanding supplements and the need for proteins, be it a vegetarian protein or another protein, and fats, healthy fats, all that is important. And some people literally go, no, I eat everything low fat, no fat. And I go, like, you need fat. You need fat for the brain. You need fat for collagen. You need fat for flexibility. It's all important in this whole industry. Let's call it an industry, because that's what it is. We have a few gyms in this town. It's an industry. It is an outlet for people to go to, but they know there is a need and a desire from people to work out, to become fit. But many people think if I just do the equipment and I start developing some muscles, I'm in good shape. But you need the nutrients in order to feed those muscles, and that often gets overlooked. And it doesn't have to be supplements, but probably supplements have to become part of it.
Everything, yeah, it's all part of the scheme, really. It's not like one or the other, but I would say that a supplement is a tool that can allow somebody to take their recovery and their training farther. Okay, build their muscles, burn their fat, whatever it is, but to not rely on it as this magic pill. I mean, so many people, as you know, do. They want to look for the magic pill, and a lot of the stuff on the internet now promises just crazy stuff. I mean, I see ads on Facebook that are, lose 40 pounds in 2 months or something like that, and I'm like, what? And the other thing is too, 40 pounds of what? Yeah. My whole thing is weight is a terrible measure. It tells you doesn't tell you a whole lot, because are you losing muscle? Are you losing fat? Are you losing water?
Yeah.
And I would like somebody to lose fat and replace it with muscle. I don't care if somebody didn't lose a pound, but if they lost 10 pounds of dysfunctional fat and they put on 10 pounds of lean functional muscle, they would be a changed individual. And that's what my goal is to trying to flip that a little bit. But it's the diet, it's what you put down the pie hole and when. And intermittent fasting has a place too, because it turns on certain gene pathways and enzymes that are fat for fat burning. But it can't be abused, so it's a timing thing as well. So it's knowing how to kind of.
What do you mean it can be abused?
Well, I mean, if you try to fast too much and you go into excessive fasting, then you start to tear down muscle tissue. You want to direct it towards burning fat, having the mitochondria where fat is burned, more energized, and the main enzymes that are going to do that are AMPK or AMP kinase and PGC1 alpha. These are pathways that are potential fat burning, energy using pathways.
Okay.
And then there's the anabolic pathway, which is mTOR. But mTOR is hyperactive in many people because
mTOR is MTOR.
M starts mechanism of target of rapamycin. It's a crazy word, but really it's an anabolic enzyme. Anabolic meaning growth.
And we all have that enzyme.
We all have it. But what I said earlier when we were talking was that you can be anabolically building a heck of a lot of fat. So you need a lot of people are hyperactive, producing a lot of mTOR and a lot of insulin. Insulin's a growth promoter. Okay, but it's growing the wrong things. If you have too much insulin, you create what's called a vicious cycle, and it just keeps putting on more fat, and then more fat leads to more insulin to get blood sugar into the cell. So those kinds of things. So trying to make mTOR work for you to burn muscle, to build muscle, and not to put on fat is the key. It's a builder, but you want to building the right thing.
Right.
Okay. If you're building a house.
Is there a supplement to improve your mTOR?
Well, mTOR can be improved by like protein powder if it has leucine or HMB. Hydroxymethylbutyrate is a byproduct of leucine. Leucine is an essential amino acid that the body needs. So it's high in whey protein, for instance, but it's not only a component of essential aminos. It's also a signaling molecule for anabolic drive, mTOR. So, that's one of the reasons why whey protein can be very efficient. Now, does that mean that veggie proteins are not useful? No, they can be useful too. Some veggie proteins have a good amount of leucine in them. But you just look for these what I call signaling molecules that can help you get the job done in the right way. So you're burning fat. And most of us there's about 46% of Americans are obese, and about 20% are over fat. And I use the word fat most of the time. There needs to be some technology and some techniques of diet, exercise, fasting, and supplements that can help them achieve long-term efficient goals. And make some good strides. And it's not for everybody because it takes work. But it takes,
It is true.
it takes knowledge and work, and
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
the way it is. It doesn't have to be complex. It can be very simple.
Yeah.
But it takes a little bit of effort. But that's okay. You just once you know, and once you can start getting some good improvements on like losing some fat, and you could lose. How do you measure fat loss? I think really what the most important thing is to work on building muscle, and that will burn the fat.
That'll burn fat.
Make the
That's right.
mitochondria work more
right.
efficiently,
Yeah.
and whatnot. So
There is some kind of a conversion factor happening
Yeah.
in the body.
Yeah.
That's what you say. It's not about losing weight. It is, what are you losing?
yeah,
You're losing muscle, you're losing fat.
you never want to lose an ounce of muscle. You want to keep building it and
Correct.
make it your driver of burning dysfunctional fat. And of course, what's dysfunctional fat? Well, fat starts out under your skin, like subcutaneous fat, under your arm or something. That's pretty typically a storage site when you're young. Okay, people are pretty lean and mean when they're 12 years old or whatever.
bet.
But then they start putting on, when you start getting into your 30s and then into your 40s, you start putting on belly fat.
Yeah.
And that's called visceral fat.
Okay.
But then that gets full, and then it spills over into what's called ectopic fat. Ectopic fat means fat that's not supposed to be there. And where is that? It's in your muscle, it's in your liver, it's in your kidneys, and it's in your pancreas. So those are areas that are not supposed to be high in fat. And why? Because when they're high in fat, like muscle, creates insulin resistance, and that creates a vicious cycle of problems.
Muscle creates insulin resistance, muscle loss.
Muscle itself is where 80% of blood sugar is processed in muscle.
Correct.
So muscle to me is the problem with insulin, with blood sugar. Okay, so blood sugar has to go through muscle 80% of the time.
Yeah.
And it goes through other organs, the liver and whatever, but 80% of it goes through muscle. If muscle is dysfunctional, then the body senses that. Okay, so how does the body get blood sugar into cells anyway? It uses it through insulin, which is a hormone.
Correct.
Insulin's produced in a small cell, in a small group of cells called the pancreas, an organ called the pancreas.
Yeah.
And so when you eat a meal and blood sugar rises, the pancreas senses that and goes, oh, I guess I better make some insulin. So it makes insulin. Insulin's a hormone, travels throughout the body, goes to the muscle cell, knocks on the door. The muscle doesn't hear it.
Oh,
Okay.
I see.
Why? Because it's full of gunk. It's the stagnant pond. We created a stagnant pond. And so then what happens is the pancreas goes, well, I'll show you. And so it produces more insulin.
I see.
And it goes into the muscle and it pounds on the door. And eventually the muscle says, oh, I hear something out there. I guess I better bring it in.
Yeah.
But now you're hyperinsulinemic. You're producing gobs of insulin. Well, insulin's anabolic. So what is it growing? It's growing more fat. It's growing more fat in the muscle too.
Yeah.
So it's a vicious cycle. It's feeding on itself. So we have to break the cycle. And once you get the muscle working more efficiently, then you can lower the stress load on the pancreas. The other thing is the pancreas should last you a lifetime. Okay, but what happens is it's producing a triple shift.
And it produces other enzymes as well.
Yeah, it produces a triple shift of insulin though, and eventually it can't keep up. It poops out. It starts to lower, and now you might go on insulin. There was some research recently done on two things. One, the scientists were looking at aging and what things are affected by aging. They looked at blood sugar in young people that were young people that were healthy and young people that were unhealthy, and old people that were healthy and old people that were unhealthy.
Yeah.
And they looked at blood sugar in those, and they looked at mitochondria, which is the organelle that burns fat. It's the cellular energy of the producer
It's the
of
furnace,
the body.
the furnace
of the body.
And there is a bunch of them. There's not mitochondria. There are sometimes can be thousands in one cell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you want to have good, healthy, active mitochondria. But what they found was that mitochondria does reduce with aging, which means you need to focus on it when you're aging to keep it working properly. But what they found that I found very interesting was with the blood sugar issue, when they were looking at that, is aging does not influence blood sugar. It's your lifestyle that influences
It's the
blood
other way
sugar.
around.
Yeah, because if somebody that's young could have a blood sugar problem just as much as an older person.
Right.
So it's fixable. In other words, if you can just get to it and fix your blood sugar, then that 110 million pre-diabetics would not be here.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's really important as we get older is to build muscle strength and function so that, we can have a good, long, healthy life and not be, having to struggle or sit in a nursing home or something like that.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I found a very interesting observation that most older people are being cared for by their children and mostly women. So when somebody needs to be cared for, then you're taking women out of the workforce to take care of the elderly person, whereas if the elderly person was able to handle it themselves and be independent, that other person could contribute to society. So I think for America, it's a big boost if we can get everybody working properly and not having to just spin our wheels, kind of thing.
Right. I think that's a key, how we live our life. And I often tell people, if you take a skeleton and you hold it up in the air and you drop it, it literally, or if you let it go, it literally falls to the ground.
Yeah.
So we are held up by muscles.
Yeah.
And then the tendons and ligaments, they hold it all together. But the muscles are really, they need to stay active. They need to stay developed. And many people kind of frown at it, or they kind of, whatever, wipe it away as not important. I don't want to go to the gym. It's not about going to the gym. You got to do something. I don't care if you use body weight,
right,
but start working with the different muscle groups in your body. Learn something about it. This is your own body, for crying out loud. And I have also, there's days when I'm not as motivated, but I just try to I have created my own routine, how I do things and what time of the day, etc., and just stick with that program. But many people take care of their cars better than their own body. The cars are, well, that has to bring me from point A to point B. That thing's got to go. Well, your body has to take you from point A to point B. And so when we don't take care of it, then it can become a problem. And now there are people who say, yeah, but what if you've been in the war and you've been shot at and you have those. I get it. Car accidents, trauma, rape, abuse, there are a lot of exceptions, which puts people in a position where it is a lot harder to recuperate and build strength and be able to stand straight, etc., etc. But there is a large percentage of people who did not go through those kind of traumatic events who have every opportunity to take care of themselves and become less of a burden on our current healthcare system.
Yeah.
So then if people take more responsibility about what it means to actually be healthy and take care of your health, what would that do for our healthcare? Instead of just talking about taking prescription drugs, the average American over 65, average, is taking 9 prescription drugs every day.
Yeah.
Could we avoid some of that?
Yeah.
Is that the mistake of the individual, or could it be the doctors? That's a whole other show. Love to chat with you about it. But the point is, there are a lot of people who could take care of their body better and save a lot of money in the long run and have a great quality of life and unburden the healthcare system as we know it today. So
we have a system. We have 2 systems that are kind of at times going against us. There's the medical system, which is pharmaceutical focused, which I always thought I'm more holistic. You and I are more holistic. I'm not opposed to pharmaceuticals, but I think that they have a place, and I don't think they're in every case, and I don't think that somebody really needs to be on 9 different things, which is probably one after treating another thing, which is treating another thing, which is
and that's the average.
Yeah, that's the
over
average.
65.
It's crazy. And then the other thing is the food industry, has evolved to be just the food industry. If you really think about it, my undergrad degree's in ag science, and I'm very conscious of agriculture and how we grow things. And if you think about it, all agriculture is based on weight. It's got nothing to do with nutritional value. So an apple is just, how do you buy an apple? You don't go to the store and say, oh, well, it has this much polyphenol content and blah, blah, blah. You buy it because it was this much a pound.
Yes.
The same with a steak. So when you have a steak, now you put a lot of, you feed finish that steer on on corn.
Yeah.
And now you've got a marbled steak with tastes delicious, but it's full of saturated fat, which has palmitic acid, which increases insulin resistance in muscle cells.
I see.
It's a whole process.
Yeah.
And so the food industry, too, is based on, and the food pyramid is based on stuff designed by the food industry. So everybody has to have their radar and their BS meter turned up to really evaluate for themselves what's appropriate and what's not. And, you know, you have some people that are totally into vegetarian and veganism and all that. And like you said, some people do extremely well with
Really
that.
well.
Absolutely. Go
You
for
bet.
it.
Yeah.
You know, we have a good friend, Paul, that's a vegan bodybuilder, and he's phenomenal. And he's built like a brick.
Yeah,
so,
it is.
Yeah, everybody's different.
Is, yeah.
And everybody's different. So, but, you know, the society has allowed, you know, big corporations and stuff to do this. And I don't mean it, I'm not a doubting Thomas or anything, but I just think that we have to use some more common sense for ourselves, ask more questions, and learn more, because it's our body.
I think so too. If you just say, I want to be in this diet, do some reading about it. What are some of the pros and the cons, and how can you live with those? Is there something you can balance in that? So anyway, Rick, great show.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it was fun. I enjoyed it.
You know, it's actually funny because I've talked to you and I've heard bits and pieces about your trips and how that has developed into where you are today. And I never really heard the whole story. So I thought I might as well get you on the show and we talk about it. So thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Thank
Folks,
you, Jacobus.
thanks for listening and watching. And I hope you learned something. We give some information how you can get a hold of Rick in the comments below. And thanks so much for tuning in today. And hopefully you check in for more shows of Health in Focus. All the best.